So girls, in this video we're going to be looking at how do we express one quantity as a percentage of another. Now we might ask ourselves why we might want to do that. Well, imagine that we did a French test, and for our French test that we got a result of 14 out of 20. And for our German test, which was 75 marks, we had 54 out of 75. Now we look at those two results and we can't compare them directly because when expressed as fractions, they have different denominators. So we know that if we want to compare two fractions, the only way we can do that is to make sure they have a common denominator. Well, why not choose a denominator of 100? And so when we're finding the percentage we convert that to a percentage, 14 over 20 times 100% over 1 becomes 14 times 100 over 20. And we look at the numerator, we divide it by 10 and we get a result of 10. The denominator is divided by 10 and we get 2. We can divide the denominator here by 2 and get 1. 2 and a 14 goes 7. And so that's going to be equal to 7 times 10, which is equal to 70%. So in other words, the French result represents 70 out of every 100 marks, or 70%. The German result, again, if we do the same thing, 54 out of 75, converted to a percentage by multiplying by 100%. Remember, 100% is equal to 1. So that becomes 54 times 100 over 75 times 1. And again, looking here, we've got a common factor of 25 in the numerator. 25 into 100 goes 4. And there are 3 25s in 75. 5 and 4 make 9, so that means that that number can be divisible by 3. So 3 into 3 goes once. 3 into 54 is going to give you 18. So that's going to give you 4 times 18%. And that's going to be equal to 72%. So the German test represents a score of 72 out of every 100 marks, or 72%, and the French test represents 70 out of every 100 marks, or 70%. So we'll move quickly to question number 4 in our text. So question number 4, and that's on page 152. And we're asked for homework to do the problem, for example, 4b, which says, what is the percentage of 13 out of a total of 20? So what does 13 out of 20 represent? So step 1, we always put the total amount on the bottom as the denominator, and the part that we've got is 13, so we converted that to a fraction. Now we're going to convert that to a percentage by simply multiplying by 100% over 1. So we have 13 times 100% over 20 times 1. Now, we don't multiply the numerator out first because in the numerator there is a factor of 10 which also appears in the denominator. So we would be just doing double work if we were not to cancel the common factors. So 100 divided by 10 gives me a result of 10. 20 divided by 10 gives me a result of 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 into 10 goes 5. So that becomes 13 times 5%, which is equal to 65%. Now girls, what you need to notice here is this is the setting out that you'd be expected to demonstrate. Writing it first as a fraction. Next line, equal to, and we're multiplying by 100%. Now remember, why is that equal to this? Because 100% is equal to 100 over 100, which of course is equal to 1. So all we're doing here is multiplying 13 over 20 by 1 in a convenient form. Don't forget this step where we're looking for common factors. And of course, if you want to, you can always use your calculator to simplify the problem. But for most of these problems that you'll be doing, you can simply solve the problem by cancelling common factors. So that's an example from question 4, page 152. So it becomes a little bit more difficult, but not that much more difficult, if we have two quantities being compared, but they aren't in the same units. An example of that is Imagine I've run 400 metres out of a race of 1.6 kilometres. So I want to find 400 metres as a percentage of 1.6 kilometres. So the quantity is the same, both of them are distance, but this one is measured in kilometres. So the first thing we need to do is to recognise that 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres, so that would become 1,600 metres. And so now we are comparing 400 metres as a percentage of 1,600 metres. So step one becomes the same. We write it as a fraction. Now we could at this stage do our cancellation, but we can just stick to our method of multiplying by 100% over 1. And so that will become 400 times 100% over 1,600. Now we have a common factor of 100 in the numerator and 100 in the denominator. So by cancelling those two zeros, I'm indicating that I'm dividing the numerator and the denominator by a common factor of 100. We also have a common factor of 4. 4 and a 4 goes once, 4 and a 16 goes 4. So we're going to be left with 100 over 4, which would be equal to 25%. So in other words, what we have is that 400 metres expressed as a percentage of 1.6 kilometres is 25%. Of course, some of you would recognise that we could have very easily simplified straight away, recognising that 400 over 1600 is just going to be equal to the fraction 1/4. And of course, 1/4 can be easily converted to a percentage. But this gives us a general process for dealing with problems where the numbers are perhaps not quite so easily manipulated. So that's an example from our textbook. It was from question number 7, and the problem that we were doing there was question 7D, and that's on page 153. So girls, that should help you to set out those problems. Notice the procedure. We keep the equal signs underneath each other. Don't allow the percentage sign to drop, because this is only equal if that is 100% and not 100. So the next sort of problem that I'm going to look at is when we do not have, next sort of problem that we're going to be looking at is a problem, different sort of problem, where we want to find a percentage of a quantity. So an example of that would be, for example, in question number 9, and I'll look at 9b, we're asked to find 20% of 45. Okay, this problem becomes relatively simple. We simply remember that 20% means 20 over 100. Of can be interpreted as multiplied, and multiplied by 45. So that becomes 20 multiplied by 45 over 100 times 1. Now again, we look out for common factors. The numerator and the denominator have a common factor of 10. And we also have a common factor of 2. So 2 into 2 goes once. 2 into 10 goes 5. So that will give us 5 into 45 goes 9. So 9 is 20% of 45. Of course, when we're setting out these problems, we wouldn't necessarily show these arrows here. We're simply going to be setting our work out down the page. Some of you may recognise that 20% is equal to 1/5. So really we're being asked to find 1/5 of 45. And of course that would be equal to 45 over 5, which is equal to 9. Don't fall into the mistake of writing down percentage here, because we're actually asked to find the percentage of a quantity in this particular case. If the problem has units, for example, if we're asked to find 15% of $5, okay, again, 15% means 15 over 100, of means multiply, 5 over 1, the answer will be in dollars. So that's going to be equal to 15 times 5 over 100 times 1. 5 into 5 goes once. 5 into 100 goes 20. So that would be equal to 15 over 20. And we can recognise here we have a common factor of 5. 5 into 15 goes 3. 5 into 20 goes 4. So it's going to be equal to 3/4, which is equal to 0.75. So now we need to interpret 0.75. That, of course, is going to be equal to $0.75 or 75 cents. So beware of some problems where you'll need to interpret your answer. The 3/4 here, we wouldn't say 3/4 of a dollar. We recognise that 3/4 of a dollar is going to be equal to 75 cents. So that's an example from question number 11 on page 153. Now, girls, the very last problem that I want to look at is a problem from problem solving. So we've got Jasper who's scored 22. So this is number 15. Jasper scored 22 out of the team's 36 points, and we're asked to write that as a percentage. So 22 out of 36 multiplied by 100% over 1. So that becomes 22 times 100% over 36. We see common factors of 2. 2 into 22 goes 11. 2 into 36 is going to be equal to 18. And we have 2 into 18 goes 9. 2 into 100 goes 50. So we're left with 11 times 50 over 9%, which is going to be equal to 550 over 9, which is going to be equal to 9 6s are 54, carry the 1, 9 1s are 9, 61 and 1/9%. But we also need to recognise that 1/9 can be written as a recurring decimal because it means 9 divided into 1.0000. We cannot divide 9 into 1 unit, so we need to change the 1 unit into tenths. So dividing up 10 tenths evenly would get 1 and 1/10 left over, so we need to convert that to a hundredth. So now we have 10 100ths, and so we divide that by 10, we're going to get 1, and of course the process continues. So that would be equal to 61.11 recurring percent. So girls, that's a summary of how to do most of the problems that we find in exercise 3H of your textbook. Thank you, girls.